Hello, this is Pat Cahill from Pat Cahill Metalworks, and today we're going to make a pendant. It's going to be a fan pendant, and the first step is to cut out the shape of the fan, and I'll do that with my saw. And as usual, I'll be cutting through this so you don't have to suffer through the sawing all the way around. But so I'll see you then. Okay, so the two pieces are cut out, and I'm going to put them together just to make sure that they're exactly the same, and put them in a hand clamp here. Clamp that down and then file the edges. It's just, not only does this get the edges nice and smooth, but it also makes sure that they match perfectly. Right, okay. So I'll file this first, and then I'll sand it, and we should have a perfect mating of the two. Okay, and then we'll go on to the next stage. I also need to do this bottom, but I'll do that off camera. So give me a second to do that and I'll get back to you. Okay, so both of these have been cut out like I said, and they've also been, all the edges have been smoothed and flush with one another. So the next step is to take the thicker sterling silver and saw down each one of these saw out these black portions. That's the piece I want. So we'll do that. With this you need to be very careful and also use like one of your smallest saw blades that you have. I would suggest like a 3.0 or an 03. I'm using an 02. So just take your time and go down on both sides. And I'll do one, I'll bring you back. Okay, so I did two, just to give you a better idea, so you can see cutting it out. And I'll continue to do that all along here. So, it's, it's a little bit of work, but it's gonna look a lot nicer, have that little extra detail in the fan. So, I'll get back to you. Okay, so it's all been cut out, and we will sweat solder that to the bottom. But first, what we want to do is make sure that our edges are all nice and smooth. So I'm going to use my bench vise here, plop it in there, and cutting down nice, protect it with whatever you got, but I use these little rubber pads. So I'm going to go along and do this for each one of the little cutouts for the fan, and I will meet you back when that's done. It's these little steps that make everything so much nicer in the end. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, so the next step is to sweat solder the two halves together, and I start by fluxing and putting solder chips over the whole surface, spread out evenly. It looks like a lot of solder chips, and it really is actually, but you want to make sure that you don't have any gaps below that will show through. So that's why you kind of go overboard here. I'm going in kind of slowly because I don't want my solder chip to start bouncing around on me. And as soon as they start to round up, you can go in a little bit tougher. There we go. Now I'm not using soft solder here because I'm going to be doing quite a few other solder steps, and so alright, so that's done. We'll pickle that, and then we will try to sand it as flat as possible. You know, not a lot because it's gonna flow again. So, but still, we want a nice connection between the two. And this is stuck a little bit to the bottom, which I don't like because, well, there we go. It's off. So I'll quench it and then I'll pickle it, and I'll be back for the next step. Okay, so we pickled it. I sanded it down a little bit so there's no like blobs, more, well, there's blobs, but they're flattened down a bit. So I'm going to flux it. And put it on top of my other piece. Actually, it'd be nice if I flux both of them. So why not? Okay, now align them. They should be very easy to align, and they are. I like to push it down a bit, but I will do that when we start to flyer it. I just want to make sure it's aligned and it's ready to go. So we're now flow the solder, so we're sweat solder the two halves together. Okay, we're done. So we're quench that, put it in the pickle, and I'll be back. Okay, so I went ahead and fluxed it and laid down some gold solder in the inside. And so I'm ready to flow the solder. Heating up the big chunk of sterling silver we have here and fine silver underneath. And then slowly working our way into the bezel. If you went for the bezel first, the solder would just climb up the sides walls. It would not form a good seal or a good joint. So you always want to be heating up the big part first. And let me get a pick. Okay, so that's flowed. And I'm going to put it in the, quench it, put it in the pickle. And I'll be right back. Okay, so that's soldered on good, and you can always check it by just making sure there's no light coming out, and there isn't, from the seam. So now I'm going to go and solder the bails. I'm going to do this upside down because, well, on the reverse side, because I want to make sure that I have a good, that any solder blobs are easier to clean up on this side. They won't be as easy to clean up on the other. So, as always, flux. Don't worry about placement just yet. Well, a couple other things I did that I guess I didn't show you, sorry. On these wires that come down here, I flattened them to give them even more surface with the pendant. I want to make sure that these are symmetrical on both sides. Right there. And so that solder might bleed over on the top, or which is now the bottom or the back of the, and that can be easily cleaned up because it's just a flat surface. We'll just edge this over. Alright, so we got it fluxed and solder chips on there. And as I said, we're going from the back so that any solder blobs can be easily cleaned up and we don't have the bezel in the way where we're going to set our cabochon. So we'll heat up the big piece of sterling silver first again, as always. Again, I want to make sure that this is hot because the solder will just jump onto the gold and away from the, oh, perfect. Away from our bales if we didn't make that first. Okay, so that's done. And we'll put that into the pickle and we'll be back. And I can see you can see there's a little bit of gold right up there. And that's why we did it on the back, so we can clean that up. So I'll be back. Okay, so here it is. And the next thing to do is sort of clean up as much as possible. Get rid of that. And that can be done either with a file, so it's a real small and fine file. And that's probably the way I'll start it, and then we'll go from there. So, let's bring this over a bit. And just slowly file out any of that excess gold that's gone over. And we'll also want to take care of these edges here, just to bring them down a little bit, make it a little bit smoother transition. Alright. Yeah, that looks nice. So I'll work this part off camera, and we'll get ready to do our next part, which is Keum-Bo. I have to get that all set up too, so. I don't even have the oven going yet. Okay. So that's where it sits right now. It needs a little bit of cleaning, but we'll do that and I'll get back to you. Okay, so I have it all set up. I have it on my beehive kiln here. I've already put the Keum-Bo gold, the 24 karat gold foil on there because it's just such a pain to do that. Wow. It is on there. And now I need to take my time burnish this in. I want to just set each one initially so it's sticking, and then we'll burnish it. Pull it down. Burnish it. So you're using an agate burnisher. You can see that the sterling silver is turning a little bit brown because I didn't do like I did in the last Keum-Bo, where I depletion gilded it by continually firing and then firing. So that's good for a first course. I'm going to fiddle around with it a little bit more, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so I put the Keum-Bo in, for the gold. And now I'm going to set the stone. The Keum-Bo was a little bit more difficult than I thought. I've done a lot with Keum-Bo, but I haven't really tried to put into these little narrow areas like this, and had a really tough time doing it. So, as we always, just start going around, pushing it in towards the stone. Oh, I'm not using my little plastic thing this time. That's okay. This is more what everybody else uses for setting stones. Metal burnisher. Okay, so we go around, and then after we pushed it in, then we turn it over. Okay. So, just go around, smoothing over the edges, give a nice smooth finish, and that's what I'll do right now, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, so it's all cleaned up and ready to attach the necklace chain to. So that's pretty easy. We just get some jump rings. This one's already been pulled apart, and of course I didn't show you, but I decided on this chain. Actually, I would love to have it as a gold chain, but don't have the money for that. Gold's so expensive right now that if somebody wanted to, it would be very easy to replace the chain and put a gold chain on it. Okay, so that's gonna be one side. And typically what you do is you put the clasp side to the right. I think that's more comfortable. I don't know. I haven't put on a lot of necklaces, but that's the right-hand way of doing it. So I guess if you're left-handed, maybe I should make it for left-handed people. But then you would do it the other way around. Okay, so let me just, I didn't really set these right. Back and forth squiggly motion for these so that they align perfectly and they're butted up against one another. And it's actually better if you steady your arms, which I wasn't doing, but there you go. There's our jump ring for that side. And we're at the other side. Now, of course, these need to be soldered. I have a tough time here because I'm not steadying my hands up against something. But this is so easy, I can just do it with one. And if that sits good, and it does, then we'll be able to solder it relatively easy. So when you try to solder these things, you don't want to be worried about your stone for one thing. But if the silver doesn't touch any of the other metal, then it's not going to be a heat sink. And it'll be relatively or very easy to solder these. So let me get my solder and everything ready and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're ready to solder. Just a small little bushy flame will do, and I'm actually going to pick solder it. Alright, that's done. Oops, turning off my flame. And I did the other one offline just to show you how we do it. And I'll be back. Okay, so here it is. There's been so many twists and turns in this process of making this necklace. It's quite, I don't know if you're seeing it good there. There's just you know, I had planned on making it, oxidizing it. And my original design thought of this necklace was going to be sort of Japanese look. But now, I think it looks kind of like Egyptian, kind of. At least that's the vibe I'm getting from it. And that makes me not want to oxidize it. I just kind of like to leave it the way it is. It looks very nice that way. And it's just a really cool, sort of unique statement pendant. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. It was, you know, I had a lot of twists and turns throughout making this, but that's what happens sometimes. Especially if you're not doing something that you've ever done before. And quite a few things here I had not previously done. Trying to set the gold, the Keum-Bo, inside these little cutouts was extremely tough. I don't know if I got some good video of that, but it's just cutting those pieces of Keum-Bo and setting them in there and burnishing them in there. Turned out okay, but it was tedious. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again sometime. Bye.